What is Shaolin Kenpo? Shaolin Kenpo is the shield of faith. What I mean by the shield of faith, it is the power of three: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Actually, also it means the law of the fist and the empty hand. When you have that shield of faith, the power of three, you will always be able to survive. It's so important. Giving you an example, power of three. The Father, if a person throws a punch, you give it to the Son takes it over, the Son will say, go in peace. If it means to strike, then you take it to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit will strike and stop the person. There's your power of three. And then you put it together, it makes a person humble, and that's your prayer. Shaolin Kenpo deals with the fact of we're always in control of ourselves and in control of the person that's attacking us. It's so important to feel that you have that power of three within you, and you'll be able to stand up against a person. And I think we always have the universal motion of this. We always say this. In every nationality, they always have the humbleness of being humble. Now, when you're attacked, whether it's the left hand is going to be striking or the right hand, both hands will actually move in direction. Defense, offense, defense, offense. That's our natural position. And that is what Shaolin Kenpo is about. We try to work it, make it as simple as 1, 2, 3. Always relating to the idea of 1, 2, 3. The past, the present, and the future. The strength of my art is speed, power, and accuracy. Again, we're relating to 3 strikes. 1, 2, 3. It also involves with thought, words, and action. When you think about it, how to strike and where to strike, and that's what makes it so unique of Shaolin Kenpo. It's simple, and yet it's effective. Because the power of three deals with the first power, you can bruise the outside. The second power, you can break the inside. And the third power, you can stop the person completely. By that, what I say, the first power is that, for example, there's a way that you can punch a person, you can palm a person, you can chop. There's many ways of emphasizing how you can strike. For instance, the palm. Say if you tap somebody on the forehead, maybe you can suggest that he should have had a V8, and if you want to bruise the inside, you would actually tap him on his nose, and that would actually split his nose. But then if you go a little further, you would shove the bone up into his brains. You can stop a person completely just with the heel of the palm. But that heel of the palm can change over, not just the palming face, but it can go into a choking position or grabbing or ripping. So that's what I'm talking about, the 3 types of power. You bruise the outside, you break the inside, you stop them completely. Now, another understanding of that, the first power is more like the primitive stage. You're learning something for the first time, and it's important for you to practice. By practicing, it falls into the mechanical stage, and then of course the mechanical stage would actually lead you to the highest level, which is called the spontaneous, and you don't think about it. In your natural reaction, you'll strike the person whatever you decide to do, because you're introduced all 3 types of power. And striking actually doesn't mean just a punch. It could have been a palm, it could have been a chop. And if you've been in it a little more further, then it deals more with accuracy, a poking for the eye, or something like that. So again, everything that you apply at the split second is going to be spontaneous. And no one on the outside will correct you and say you made a mistake. No one. when I say simple as 1, 2, 3, we try to create, say, one punch. And the one punch is not good enough, so we say, well, let's go 2 punches. So we can actually retract. That's how we get the speed, because retracting is so important. Then we said, wait a minute, we need the power, speed, power. So go 3 punches. And that gave you the speed, the power, and accuracy. Now, once you have those 3 punches, we mold those 3 punches and put it back in just that 1 punch. And then you say, wow, my 1 punch, I have the speed, power, and accuracy. What happens if I hit the person 2 times? It's double or 3 times. That's where it's the thought, the words, and the action comes in. And again, bruising the outside, breaking the inside, and stopping them completely. And that's the primitive stage, the mechanical stage, and what? The spontaneous. I like to use the spontaneous a lot because sometimes if our hand technique doesn't work as good, we'll pick up an object and use it. And that object is going to make it very, very effective. It makes no difference wherever you got it. If it's face going face, let's say if you hit the guy and give him 2 black eyes, that's fine. And they're going in the fist. Now, if you don't have the accuracy with the fist, then the palm is good enough. But the whole idea is that's your target, face, going face, if that's what you choose. But make sure you are going for those targets. If you just go to a gesture of face going face and not knowing where your target, like face going face, that doesn't stop the person. You have to make sure that your thought of words is going to the face, the groin, and the face. That's the action that you have, because you chose to go face going face. Now make sure you have that action behind it. If you just go just emotional, face going face, and no action behind it, it's senseless. It's a wasted motion. Just like having a gun. You got 6 bullets in it and all you got be lucky. What happens if you have only 1? You better be really sharp at that. Otherwise, you might as well use it against yourself. We go circular as well as a straight line, because we have to apply our split second of attack, whether we go defensive or whether we choose to go offensive. And that's what the Shaolin Kenpo is about. It's going either offensive or defensive. It all depends on our first application, if it meant that. If it's going to be a defensive, we'll step back. But once we step back, that doesn't mean we're only going to step back. We can also repeat going forward. And then also we go forward and then we'll stop at that split second. If that person has a good defense, then he'll go to an offense. Then we'll have to go back to defense. And that's where the circular motion comes in to offset that technique that's coming in. So I would say that in the Chinese system, it's a circular, but we can go either linear or we can go. There's no one way. There's all different ways. System, we try to make them understand and use different terms, like we have the flaming sword, because remember you talked about the linear, we would strike forward this way, and then we have a circular, which is called the windmill, we'll go opposite, and then we come down. We try to counter as much as we can a person who actually is applying those techniques to us. In other words, if a person comes in straight into us, we'll go to the side. And if a person comes in through the side, we'll go inside. The takedown is another important part. Once you entangle yourself with the person, then no longer it's the hands. The legs will take the place of trying to trip the person down. And then that will break the technique, and then we can follow through again. Salutation, okay, I would have to say, like I said, I remember I've told you that I've always given the glory to my Lord Jesus Christ. And it's from the Psalms. I interpret it from the Psalms of the great King. For instance, the salutation begins, "Split wide the gates, open the ancient doors, let the great King in." Who is the great King? He is the Lord, awful and mighty, victorious in battle. Fling wide the gates, open the ancient doors, let the great King in. Who is the great King? He is the triumphant Lord. I like to have my people, before they go into competition, if they can recite that and have him come into their heart, they will have all the strength and wisdom of their performance. The creed, I adapted that from Ed Parker. Ed Parker's first book of the Secrets of Chinese Karate. Ed had his creed that came over, and then what I did was I borrowed the creed. I asked him that I love the creed that he had. And the only difference that I did, instead of saying Kenpo Karate, I used Shaolin Kenpo. We both learned from the same teacher. It's just that as individuals ourselves, the Ed Parker system, the Ralph Castro system, we both actually are creative in our own style. And what we try to do is flavor it by adding a little bit more. We don't take away anything from each other. We add everything that we have. Now remember, everything that we add is not taken away from anybody. It's just given to us. Now it's so important that we still have the same basic foundation, speed, power, and accuracy in our performance. Now, how you apply the speed, power, and accuracy will be up to each individual. Now, especially if you're fighting one person, or maybe you're fighting two people, or you're fighting three people, how much application or how much power and speed has to be applied at the same time? I would like to just say this way. If you take the first strike and deliver the first strike correctly with the speed, power, and accuracy, then that's all it needs. But if you have to take the same speed, power, and accuracy and distribute against different people, it is still the same balance, because you're always delivering the same concept. You hit one person, you move on to the second person, the third, the fourth, the fifth. You go back and forth, back and forth. A dance is a person in motion. I think when we say we would like to use it as a dance, as techniques, because so someone doesn't forget their techniques. Like we're saying, remember we always talk about thought, words, and action. Just trying to remember what you said and put it in action, and make it like it's a dance to your own self. That's all. I would say that. Then you have that inner strength in your body. Every muscle that you move is because that muscle was once produced by going into a certain position, and you're very comfortable. When you move to another division, it's another position. But just combining all of that forms a big dance. You could say it's a form, or when a form has fluid motion in it, that becomes a dance. Mountain Ridge River is our first form of self-defense, or dance. And the reason I went into Mountain Ridge River is because it starts from the salutation, and as we look into the universe, we ask for forgiveness, the Holy Trinity, and from here a prayer, and it changes from Mountain Ridge River. This is the snow, and this is the mountain. And the first disaster that we have is an avalanche. When the snow comes down, it wipes off everything and it covers everything. But as it settles to the bottom, then it actually melts and becomes a river. And that's our next dance, which is called High River. And the river actually flows. The water goes over, under, around, and that's the idea of continuous motion of flowing. The techniques keep on flowing. No matter what the object is, we either go around, underneath, on top. But anyway, as the water rises, it gets to a certain peak, then it has to break. And when it breaks, it becomes like a river dam. Just like the Niagara Falls, the water comes down. And once it falls down, it changes into swift rapids. And it's like the American River, very rapid. That's our offensive technique because the water rushes. But as it settles, as it goes out, it starts to float out to sea. As it floats out to sea, and you're in the middle of the ocean, the first thing you do is you look at the horizon. But what do you spot? You try to look for land. And when you see the top of the land, the land that you see is the peak of the land. That's called High Mountain. And that's another form from Swift Rapids to High Mountain. And then as the water actually starts to flow, it flows to the shores. That's where Mountain Ridge River again, it starts to cycle again. The water goes into the land, and that's when it evaporates and becomes like snow. So that's the whole idea, continuous motion. There's no ending to it. There's a beginning and there's the ending. And there's no ending. It's just the beginning. I think everything basically is universal, no matter what. A punch is a punch, a chop is a chop. But it's how you apply the technique. You see, every system is good. Every style is good. But it's the person behind the system that makes the system. Now, in our style, basically, we try to imitate the animals. I use the hand techniques as part of my dances. I use it. There's 12 techniques of hand motions, but that's how I pick up certain characteristics of certain people that I have. Try to get more of focusing or aggressiveness of the performance that if I name a certain dance, like Eagle Fly Slow, I would like the person to try to feel like he's an eagle and imitate the eagle. And I think that gives him the strength behind the technique itself. I don't create the dances, I just review the dances. And then I look at what I reviewed, and then I study. I said, okay, in place of a fist, maybe I'll just put a palm into it. And that makes it like it's a new dance, but it's not. It's still the same basic of flowing, but it's an understanding that you can always say that you have changed a hand technique to make it much more easier, because you got to remember there's speed, power, and accuracy, and now you're working on accuracy. So now instead of a punch or palm or chop, you have to go further, and this is when the hand techniques change. It becomes the dragon head, all the and poking of the eyes, or even the thumb for the eyes. And all you do is changing your whole idea of application. Now, if I introduce to you the simple motion of a punch of one, two, three, then sometimes you can't punch a person. Then we say use the palm. And after you use the palm, the hands open, you can use the chop. And maybe after the chop, you say, okay, let's use the tiger claw. So now the ripping comes in. So all of that actually changes. But it's the same hand technique, but it's just the angle of how you strike it. And as you coming down, sometimes you have to go to the side. Sometimes you have to come up. Then when you put a combination, you're up, down, side, side. Just like how a painter would paint side to side, up and down. That's it. So it's just a matter of changing different hand technique. You concentrate on one hand, but now you concentrate, well, let's use the left hand. Now let's put both hands together. Then it becomes something that's still there, but it looks like an illusion. The same thing that you had circular, you do circular. And it makes it very interesting to say, wow, I've learned something new. You already had that. It's just how you adjust the creativity behind it to make it interesting. And the whole idea is that if you're using all of that, it's because your attack rate is not only straight, or it may be on the side. So that's why you move from side to side or front to back. But besides that, the legs has to move too. The legs is the one that actually, if you can walk, you can run. Okay. If it means you have to crawl, you crawl. If you have to go on your body, your stomach, you have to do that. Think about the animals. You have snakes that go on the body. So that idea of borrowing from the animals actually gives you a second idea of how you can approach. Then we go to the dragon. When I perform a certain technique myself, as I'm doing it, say that I want to start a new dance, I will do something and how I feel first in expressing that technique itself. That's the first thing. Then I say, okay, let's say if I use the leopard or tiger, what do I get out of it first? And if I feel that the tiger gives me a better expression, or the lion gave me whatever at the time, then that actually is the dance itself. It's just a natural feeling how I feel first before I transfer it to giving it to somebody else. I have to feel all of that myself. Then I know that I'm satisfied with it. But if I just give a name and I have no self-expression of how it feels, then it's not the dance that I want. But usually it's how I feel first. Everything is how I feel. I have to say that when I left Professor Chow, I was craving to learn, but I had no one to turn to except I turned to my Lord Jesus Christ. I just prayed every night, and then by amazement, I had it in my dreams. So in my dreams, I created everything. From my dreams, I would get up at night and perform the techniques. And then I just kept it in my mind, again, the thought, the words, and the action. And that gave me my three types of power. I went into the idea of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, but that was also known as what? My shield of faith. And because of the salutation and everything, that's we introduced in our form. It's universal in the martial arts, the law of the fist and the empty hand. And that's where the natural position of mountain meets river. The right hand is the mountain and the left hand is the snow. But that was my creative. From there, it worked out. And then on my next dance, I went where it was, we have to take that very first step to a long, long journey. So my next key dance, besides the high river, the river dam, the swift rapids, and the high mountain, was iron fan. Because as we take that first journey, a long step, we need a fan to keep ourselves cool. So that's where the iron fan comes in. But then as we walk and as we look, our next dance became Eagle Flies Low. The eagle flies, you look at the eagle is the one that looks for a far angle, and he's looking beyond as he flies high, he's looking and he's looking, and that's where the eagle flies low. Then after the eagle flies low, our next dance is called Ripping Tiger. And the story is that you see the tiger running, and the eagle is the one that sees it. And as the tiger rests, the eagle comes up, and that's Eagle Flies Low. And then, of course, as we go to the next dance, the incorporation of starting using the weapons and everything. This is when you form the arrows, spear. So that's where we took place with our dances. But see, all the dances actually have to be reminded that you cannot go on further unless you repeat everything that you learned from the beginning. Just to remind you, never forget your ABCs. It's so important for you to understand that. So it's always good to review everything from the very beginning, and then you can add on. Now, you remember we talk about working a straight line, but sometimes we're going to a circle, right? So that's why we're going to the four winds. That's so important. That the attacker might come in from different angles. So that's why we have to have the imagination of somebody to learn that. You imagine that person is coming from the left, the right, the back, and that's what it's called, four winds. But then we also learn that we may have to go opposite of it, and that's called crosswinds. That's the important part. And then, of course, it gets where all the dances are added on, and you have to remember everything that you have learned and don't forget it. Because if you forget it, it's going to be a problem. So by adding everything together, it forms into the 10,000 tigers. Shaolin Kenpo is an empty hand fighting, but Shaolin Kenpo can be a weapon hand fighting. Anything that's placed in the hand is an extension. Anything that you have, like a fountain pen, a pencil, a stick, a knife. In other words, you can still incorporate everything that you have and name that particular thing that you're doing your own form of a dance. In other words, you have an empty hand motion. My hands are in motion, but if I put a knife in my hand, it's the same motion, but it has a different effect behind it because it has a cutting effect. You put a pen in your hand, it's the same effect. You swing it right and left. Now it's a scratching motion. But let's talk about what happens if it is a striking motion. That's different because now you're striking into the vital spots of the body and you're making a dent into it, and that's stopping the person completely. Like a knife, you can actually stab or you can slice. A pen, you can scratch, but you can still stab. That's different. God showed me that. He says, feel yourself. You feel your own body. Wherever you feel that aching, that's the pressure point on that. I think we all have that. We know exactly. Feel ourselves and you adjust yourself and go a little bit deeper than what you think it is, and you can feel the pressure point. And then you apply that. That's the way it is. Somebody would say, okay, go for the eye. All right, go for the eye. Okay, where? Around the eye or in the middle? See, that's what it is. Use common sense behind it. That's all. Use common sense while striking. I gave you an area where to strike, but it's up to you to apply it. Thirdly, who showed me the iron palm? I think it was the performance by Jimmy Lee when he performed breaking bricks in palm. I noticed for the first time how he broke the brick with his backhand, and I've never seen that done before. So what I did was just create the flowing motion of a continuous motion of striking that I actually just created myself just on flowing motions of continuing instead of just the one strike. I went on a continuous motion, and I would say that I guess it's just a spontaneous reaction on my part. The sparring is almost like improving the same concept of the power of three. You bruising the outside, breaking the inside, or stopping them completely. I feel just to be in rhythm is important, and the situation that you're facing. Okay, now let's match for match. Okay, when you know it's a boxer, two boxers, you know that the rules are set that you can only punch, you cannot gouge, so you have set rules. As far as for sparring, you say tournament competition. They have rules also in tournament competition that you cannot actually make full contact or draw blood, otherwise you will lose it. So, but then in self-defense, when you practice, you cannot also have blood drawn right away, but you can tell them that if you did hit someone, you're going to draw blood. So I think the controlling part plays the difference in sparring and self-defense. In other words, you can say, okay, in self-defense, I want you to make sure that you draw blood or make contact, and that's the self-defense that we're looking for because you're defending yourself. But in tournament, there's going to be certain rules. You cannot do this certain thing to injure. But it has the same concept of striking. In other words, in the sparring, you're still making contact, but you're not trying to draw blood on it. Okay. But then when you go into self-defense, you are making contact, but you are allowed to draw blood. That's what it is. Kenpo actually tries to cover a little of everything as much as possible. But the first thing we do is we try to understand that we never want to get on the ground, but I think we do get on the ground if somebody falls crack us from the back, we don't see it and happen to fall. But as long as you're facing each other, you'll know more likely the different type of person he is. If he's a grappler or if he's a fighter, because a grappler will actually show his type of motion. He kind of just hump right away. He's trying to fake you. He's trying to use gestures of getting to you close, and you can beat that right away. But if you just let him to intimidate you, that's the worst thing. Remember, never let a person control you. You control him, and that's what Shaolin Kenpo is about. Fight your own way. Don't fight his way. In other words, don't try to please him the way he's gesturing to fight. You just stick to your own natural way of fighting, and you'll be the winner. Just because he's a grappler, you're gonna grab too? No. No. Just fight what you were taught how to fight. Your own way of fighting. In Shaolin Kenpo, how it's applied to the street, you have more control over the opponent than the opponent has control over you. In Shaolin Kenpo, it's because you were taught your three types of power, at the primitive stage when you first learning it, and how much we say to practice that, which is called a perfect practice. So an idea is do it where you do it about 10 times. If you did it more than 10, you made a mistake. If you did it less than 10, you made a mistake. It's just the idea of practice. That will build you to the spontaneous. The reason you practice up to 10 is because you need to feel very comfortable. After you rest, you do it again. Sometimes a person becomes greedy, says, oh, I can count up to 1,000. But let's say, can you do it 1,000 times? No, you can't. Because you're not going to have the strength or the energy to apply it. I think 10 is good enough. 10 adds up to 1,000, to 10,000 tigers. I would say perfect practice is 10. For me, a black belt, Shaolin Kenpo. That's very interesting. I have to question that. I question myself on that there. Uh, when I received my black belt, my question was, I don't know anything. I don't know anything. That's all I said. I don't know nothing. And why did I get this belt? I just question myself, why? Yeah, of course, we have attitude where some of them would say, finally, finally. And some would go to bed and just put it under their pillow or admire it. But when I got mine, I said, I don't know nothing. Now, this is why I have to prove myself to be worthy as a black belt. That's the way I look at it. To be worthy, to be somebody respectful and have attitude and love and respect for other people. That's the way I feel. The black belt level is similar to whether you stop your education at a high school level or you want to go to a college level. That's entirely up to you. That's up to you. That's the way I look at the black belt. Because the black belt, when he gets a black belt, this is when he really starts to learn, reaching the black belt. Because at that point, he already understands what the requirements of his basic that he needs to go forward. It's so important. A black belt is just the beginning of his what? His first step that they call the first step to a long journey. Now he's resting. Now he's taking his second step to continue his journey. How do I determine the black belt name? Amount of time that they have spent with me, training in the school, and that gives me a chance to really understand or know their foundation of where they're going, their characteristics of that person. Then I feel that they are my missing links, because remember on 10,000 Tigers I mentioned that I have certain dances that I want, and if I give that certain dance to that person, I want that person to be there when we want to have it performed. He's more like my missing link. In other words, if he's out of the picture, the dance is out of the picture. So I think if he's strong, he'll always be there. If I want him to teach it, he'll be there to teach it. The ranking of belt, I think I like that feeling of feeling advancement because of the improvement of his performance. I think advancement is so important, but only to be rewarded when that person is told that he is to be rewarded that rank. But when a person is said, how come, or questions it, how come I don't get my rank, then that's why he didn't get his rank, because he questions it. But if he just said, oh, I don't think I deserve it, I'm not ready for it, then it makes me feel better that you are ready for it. Because now it's a challenge. Because now I'm giving him something, because he says he's not ready, but I'm giving him something to be ready. And then it's up to him. I think the most rewarding is that seeing a person be able to defend himself. I think that's my most rewarding thing that I can give anyone, to give them confidence that they do have the shield of faith, that they can defend themselves if they have to. Don't 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 make excuses and say I can't defend myself, or just walk away. The shield of confidence. That's all I say. They can actually apply those three types of power if they want to, and that's the shield of faith. You're not missing anything. Now, let's say when the snow comes down, does the snow just go in one direction? No, it goes in all directions. And it may go over an object, it may go under an object, but it's still going to try to get to where it wants to be. So I would say it's the same idea on the system. We try to create it that there is a way to get to where we want to go, and we will do it. Of course, you may have to think about it. You have to think about it and go back to your basic again. Say, can I do it, or I can't do it. That's what it is. So you'll just have to do the best that you can. It's just your own idea of experience. In other words, we learn from our experience, whether it's good or bad. We all learn from our experience. And that's the greatest thing that we have to remember. Now, sometimes when you know something works for you, you're going to make sure that you're going to remember that. But if something doesn't work for you, you're going to make sure that you never use that again. I mean, I learn a lot from experience myself too. And I think passing that on to other people, I think we have to understand that experience plays a very important part in our life. Like I said, that I feel that all systems are good, but it's the person behind the system that makes the system. Now, for instance, an example, boxing is international, right? Okay, but then again, it's an individual from different countries that makes him a champion. Because boxing is great, but what makes you a champion? It's a person behind the system. That's what makes him a champion. In my system of Shaolin Kenpo, has changed a lot. I've added more where I've covered a little bit more just in the basic. Instead of just a period, I've added a comma behind the basics. You could do this, you could do that, but make sure you do it right. I would say Shaolin Kenpo, I think has come a long way. From what I've learned and what I've done, I think it has an appealing effect, very appealing. It's respected now by a lot of people, a lot of other systems, because it's different, but yet it's effective. How did I get started in martial arts? In the early years, as a little boy, I learned the fundamentals of boxing through my dad. Basically, he's my hero, my dad. When I boxed with him, he would always say, attack me, hit me, try to hit me. My dad would just kind of bob and weave, and I'd try to hit him. And when I do hit him, I said, I'm sorry, Dad. He said, no, never mind, son. Just come on, hit me. And just the idea of punching my dad, I can't. But, as a father, he would actually just encourage you to attack him and fight. And that was the beginning of me knowing the fundamentals of boxing. But just a little kid, just trying to protect myself. That's all it was. I wasn't built to be an amateur fighter or anything like that, but it did give me the ability of typical jabbing and right punch that, well, it goes on. So of course, I had to defend myself before. I also had some Japanese friends that were involved in martial arts like judo, jiu-jitsu, and I went and watched how they, performed. And that was about it. I could not afford to get involved with the martial arts. My basic foundation is my basic boxing. One evening, as I was going home, my sister was hanging up a judo gi. And then I says to my sister, I said, wow, your husband's taking judo? She said, shh, it's a secret. I said, secret? I'm familiar with the judo uniform. And she said, no, it's a secret, I can't tell you. I said, okay, fine. So my brother-in-law comes home and I said, hey, Guido, that's his name, Guido. I said, I see you taking judo. He said, no, better than that, Kenpo. I said, Kenpo, what is that? He said, my teacher can handle 16 guys. And I look at him, I said, 16 guys, wait a minute. I know a good boxer can handle a couple guys, I know judo guys can throw people around, but this guy, Kenpo, he can defend 16 guys. I gotta meet this guy. So I asked him, I said, can I meet this guy? No, it's a secret, I can't. I said, I'm your brother-in-law. What's the problem? Just tell him I'm your brother-in-law. He said, I don't know. I said, come on. I gotta meet this guy. You telling me a man that can handle 16 guys? So he said, well, I tell you what, I'm gonna go visit my friend, Bill Chan, at his home this weekend, and I'll take you with me. I said, good. I like to go and meet the guy. So the weekend came along. We went to his house, this guy Bill Chan's house, and typical local guys, no different. And they were talking, and then all of a sudden, this guy comes in, says, Professor. I look at this guy, he's stout, piercing eyes, and I noticed he had calluses on his knuckles, and that's the first time I ever experienced seeing somebody with calluses in this and very stocky and piercing eyes. I said, whoa, okay. But anyway, they said, Professor, they talked to him. And I'm an outsider, I was just one side. Then I sort of asked my brother-in-law, I says, I want to meet him. Can I introduce me to him? He said, no, I can't. I said, I'm your brother-in-law. Again, my brother-in-law. So anyway, later on, he introduces to me to the professor. He said, Professor, this is my brother-in-law, Ralph. The professor goes, That's all he said. Okay. Well, I met the professor, but they were talking. Then I asked him, I said, ask him if I can see them work out. And he said, no, I don't think so. It's a secret. I said, I'm your brother-in-law. He said, well, we'll find out. So he's come back to me. He says, okay, the professor said, yeah, you can watch. It starts at 7:30 at the Nuanu YMCA. As I walked to the gym, it was separate from the gym. It was more like a room on upstairs. I heard this guy just making all kinds of noise, yelling, And I'm not familiar with the martial arts, but anyway, all this grunting and yelling. So I walked up softly, walked up to the stairs, and then I looked to the right, and I seen the professor kneeling down, watching his class, his legs crossed. And of course, I looked at him, and he looked at me, he smiled. So, remember, I only met him once, but he smiled. So I walked up close to him, I put my arms around him, and all the students, They stopped, they looked, you know, basically, who's this guy putting their arms around the teacher? Well, because I wasn't familiar with the tradition of martial arts. I just figured, well, local boys, you just local boys, you say hello, you meet the guy for the first time. Basically, you like, as if you knew him for a long time. So just a greeting of hugging him. He smiled. And then in the meantime, those guys were just going through their exercises, punching, and I guess right now I know they call it the ki, but at that time I didn't know what the ki was about. And it wasn't familiar to me like boxing. I more likely get an idea what boxing is. And this was completely different. And I guess the professor looks at me and I guess he read my body language. Because in the back of my mind I said, what are they doing? You know, what the hell are they doing? So he said, stop. Everybody stopped. And he calls up one of the instructors, a black belt, to come up. He stood up and he told the black belt to throw a punch at him. As soon as the black belt attacked him with the right punch, he went through the motion of oh, I seen all that. I go, whoa, to myself. And where I was kneeling down, I backed away about 12 feet from where I was. I went back and I said, wow, this is what I like to learn. I love to learn this. This is different. Now I can see the difference between boxing and what they call Kenpo at that time. So I was so impressed. What did Chow call his style back then? At that time, it was called Kenpo Karate. Kenpo Karate. And remember when I watched the professor perform, and I said, this is what I want to learn. So I talked to my brother-in-law. I said, Guido, tell the professor if I can start. He said, no, I can't. I said, tell him I'm your brother-in-law, okay? So he says, okay. So he walks up to the professor. He talks to the professor. Then he says, the professor wants to see you. I said, good. Okay, now I'm not familiar with the tradition, but I think I became a very humble person. As I approached the professor, I put my head down, talked to him, and I said, Professor? He said, He said, you like to start? Yes. He said, okay. 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. $6 a month. You have to pay 3 months advance. I go, okay. Now, at that time, $6 a month, that's a lot of money in Hawaii, because I was working just for 75 cents an hour. But anyway, I said, fine. And in fact, I just got discharged from the Coast Guard, and I was getting $20 a month from the Coast Guard every month. And, I haven't talked to my wife about it, but I told the professor, yes, I would like to. And so, anyway, I was so happy about it. They went out and have coffee, and I went out with them, have coffee, and just hearing stories of them talking. And I got home really late, about 2 o'clock in the morning. And after I got home, I was so tired. My wife would say, how was it? I said, good, I'm gonna take it. She said, you're gonna take it? I said, yeah, it's good for me and my family. And she says, how much? I said, $6 a month. It's too much. You can't do that. I have to pay 3 months in advance. So there goes that whole $20 that I have to pay. She said, you can't. I said, yes, I will. I'm going to take it. And at that time, I felt that because I was staying with my mom and my dad, it's not too bad. I think I can afford it. But anyway, I didn't listen to my wife. I just says, I'm going to take it. And that was the big thing about it. That's my biggest start of learning Kenpo for the first time. It was a closed society. They didn't open it to the public. It was just word of mouth. If you had to bring somebody in. They never wanted to bring anybody in. It was more like a club itself. by itself. That, like I said, the only way you can get in is through a family member or somebody. They never expose themselves. Like how you would commercialize. No, no, they don't do that. What was training like in Hawaii? Well, it was great. You had to focus a lot. You concentrate. Whatever the teacher is teaching you, you had to just keep on focusing to do it right. I would say that working with the professor, if I remember, I I learned a technique every time I attend school. I learned one technique, and if you miss a technique, you have to ask your peers the next time you go there, and ask them, "What did you learn last night?" So as far as training with the professor, I train Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. In fact, I try to train little extra if I can, because I was always Professor Child would always maybe call at my home and says, "Ralph, what are you doing?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Well, would you come down and help me?" And I would go and help the professor. And I was always on his beck and call. No matter what I had, I was always on the professor's beck and call. It was great for myself because whenever I help him, he would show me something, or we talk about the martial arts. And I think just being around him was the best thing that I had. But it wasn't good for my wife. I think one of the highlights of my training was when I was going to train with Professor Chow one evening. I came home and I was going to get my gi, but my gi was in the sink with the water and everything. And I questioned my wife. I said, "What is my gi doing in the sink? It's all wet." She said, "You're not going to Kenpo karate, you know." I was so furious. I picked it up, I rinsed it out. I says, "Yes, I'm going. And it was stupid of me, but I didn't think about it because you're still gonna sweat, you go with the wet gi. But in Hawaii at the time, we didn't have a dryer. You usually just hang up the clothes and then it dries. But anyway, I went training with a wet gi. But then when I came home, the minute I opened the door, I went in, and I think my wife, she was so upset. She threw things at me, bottles, plates, and everything. And in the back of my mind, I was just dodging everything. And I said, "Oh, I had good training." But anyway, I spoke to my wife and trying to apologize. And then so she said, "You got to understand you have a family here. You can't be just training every day." So I kind of reasoned with her. So I told the professor, I said, because of a problem that I have at home, maybe instead of me coming as much as I would like to, maybe, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times. If it was just 8 times, I would go. But anyway, I cut it down to just 3 times a week. I trained with him about 2 years to 3 years training in Hawaii. And then I came over. In fact, this is a long story, but I'll try to make it short. I remember I had a job as a manager at the parking lot, parking cars. In fact, working to the position of a manager to get the raise of a manager. But when the time for me to get what I'm supposed to get, they let me go. Okay, so while I was parking cars, I got to know the customers. And one advantage of knowing customers, being pleasant to the customers, I met a lawyer who was the ILWW union lawyer. He told me he'll get me a job with the longshoremen, and that's very difficult to get a job with the longshoremen in Hawaii. You gotta know the family. But I got the job just like that. And then when I went into the longshoremen, it was a good paying job. People always ask me, "How did you get the job?" I said, "My uncle My uncle. I never told him it was my lawyer that got me the job. So anyway, things were going good. I was making good money, and my wife wrote to her mother and said she wanted to come home and visit her mother. And this was for Christmas, okay? And the mother says, okay, she says she'll send some tickets for her. But it wasn't on the airplane, it was by ship. Yeah, and it was the President Cleveland ship. And at that time, I had 4 children. June was the baby at that time. So my wife and my sister took the ship from from Honolulu, and took them all the way to San Francisco. Now remember, I just got that job in longshoreman, so there was no way that I can go. But anyway, my wife wrote back to me and says, "Dear Ralph, I'm not coming home." And that breaks my heart, because there goes my family, and it says she's not coming home. And so I had to talk to my teacher. I said, "Professor, I have to go because my family is in San Francisco and I have to go." And that's how I left the professor. I had to leave the professor to meet my family. When I came to the mainland, I had no job. So somebody got me a job at the service station. In fact, I applied and I worked at the service station. And working at the service station, maybe about for 6 months, we all got a notice that we're going to lay off some people. And then laying off some people, I said, there again, I'm not going to get a job. But you know what? Some people wrote in about my attitude with the customers, that they really liked me, and they wrote to the company and told me that I was a good person. So you know what the company did? They transferred me to to Greenbrae, in Marin County. So I was running a service station. So I got, just by recommendation by people, because they said I was a nice guy, so I started to work out in Greenbrae. But this time, I took my family with me to go to work. My wife didn't mind it. She stayed in the car, and I'm running the station. As long as we were together, that was the key thing. And so, but I'm practicing at home, doing my karate as by myself. And my wife says, "What's wrong?" I said, "I'm miserable. I want to work out." And this is where she says, "Well, why don't I start teaching somebody my own?" And that's when I introduced my friend Macario Dela Cruz to start learning. And that's how I started to work out with people. And then we worked out in our living room, no, a dining room, small little dining room, working out. We have to move the dining room set out of the table. Just a little room working out, until one day, one of the guys almost flew out of the window with a fast slope. I stopped him, I grabbed him. My wife said, "That's enough, you gotta get out of here. You can't, somebody's gonna get hurt. You gotta get out of here." So where am I going? I have no place to go. So the place that we were staying on, 1014 Bryant, there was an alley. And on the weekend, they used to have a meat company there. Nobody's there. So we used to train on the rooftop, and we trained in the alley. I went to the grocery store on Mission Street, and I just happened to mention about I need a place to work out this. And he said, "Hey, I tell you what, I got a store that I got a lease on it, and it's two-year lease yet, but you can have it. But the only thing you have to do is you have to pay for PG&E, for the electrical, and it's going to be $120. That's how much you have to pay." $120, I have no money. So I had 12 people training with me, free, right? So I suggested to them, I said, "Hey, you know what? Why don't you guys, everybody chip in $10, each of you, and we'll have our own school." And this was on Valencia Street, number 1 Valencia Street, right at the corner of Market and Valencia. Some people never wanted to put out any money, but some people said, okay, they're putting in $10. So I got the place. But again, when I got to school for the first place, I had to cover up the windows because it was more likely it's not open to the public. Close up windows. And people to get in, they had to knock on the door. And so that was my training there. And that was my first time I opened up a school in that area. I brought in a friend. He was a judo man. He had a school on 24th and Potrero. I told him that I have this place that I'm leasing right now, but I gotta give it up about a few more months. So he invited me to his school, and so I trained there at his school, but I had certain days that I can train. He had it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I had to train just Tuesday and Thursday. And so we got along fine, and we're supposed to split up the rent. But you know, he wasn't honest with me because he wasn't paying his rent. Every time we have to split, I was paying his half. The splitting was always that I was paying his half, he wasn't paying at all. And I never had the freedom of doing what I want because that's his school. So I decided that I think I better move out. So that's when I went on back to Valencia Street. I found a school on 1132 Valencia Street. That was my big school that I had. And the thing about it, next door to my school, there was a bicycle shop. The guy had to move out. So when he moved out, I got in touch with the landlord's son. They actually had the apartment upstairs plus the building downstairs. And he told me that if I wanted to rent the other half, I can have the other half. So I said, it's fine. But what we did with all my people that I had at that time, and I had to move next door. So one evening, I had all my black belts, not my black belts, but my students lining up on the wall. We kicked the wall, we punched the wall just to break through for the first time to open up a new place. So everybody punched the wall, kicked the wall, this, that. And I had a big article that time in the newspaper saying that this guy opened up a karate school and he punched in the walls. What art did Professor Chow trade? All I was told, and I remember that Professor Chow learned from his father, okay? And his father learned from the Shaolin Kenpo. This is what I heard, but basically I respected it, I don't question it, and I just took it. It's a funny story about the professor. Remember I told you that my dad was a boxer earlier, right? And my dad never met the professor. He never knew who I was training with the professor, this and that. But when he found out who the professor was, my dad made a comment. He said, "Oh, I know him. His name is Willie." I said, "No, you don't call him Willie. It's Professor Chow." He said, "No, I know him, Willie. I know him because I used to fight his battles." I said, "What are you talking about, Dad? Professor Chow can handle 16 guys. I know you can fight that, but you can't." But remember, my dad says to me, he said, "Yeah, Professor Chow used to sell newspapers at the corner. And we had problems, and I used to help him fight his battles." And then my mom interrupted, says, "Who's the guy you talking about?" "It's Willie." And my mom says, "Willie? Oh, yeah, I know Willie. I know Willie. He used to be my dancing partner." I said, "Come on, Mom. You telling me my teacher, Professor Chow, Dad used to fight his battles, and you, Mom, Dad used to be a dancing partner?" I said, "No, I can't believe that." So I sent the professor, and I said, "Professor, my dad says he knows you." "What's your dad's name?" "Boss." "Boss? Oh, he used to fight my battles." "What's your mom's name?" "Lily." "Lily? That's my dancing partner." Because the professor was very talented. When the professor would actually demonstrate a technique, he used to move around and just dance around. And he said, if anybody gets wise to you, hit him in the groin. That's the professor. But he was very movable. But that was a funny story, and I said, "My God, I didn't know that." That's the true story about my dad said, "Yeah, I know Willie." So Willie, Professor Chow was called. His name was Willie, not Professor. But you had to respect. You had to call him Professor Chow. I think the professor called it Kenpo Karates because karate, they kind of more likely understand what karate is all about. So I think people took the word of karate. When you talk about karate, they got an idea what karate is. But Kenpo, they have no idea. Kenpo was just another style, but Kenpo was also as a Chinese style, Kenpo. But there's Japanese Kenpo, they call that, and there's Chinese Kenpo. What I learned from Professor Chow at that time was Kenpo Karate. So I carried that on Kenpo Karate. When I have my school here, I still call it Kenpo Karate. My involvement with Professor Chow was just to hear stories and talking about how to apply the techniques. And it was more likely not reviewing something that I learned, but just being around with him. I didn't learn any advanced knives or anything, but what I learned was the basic, like we have in mountain mature, the grabbing, how to defend yourself, the right punch, and I actually just cherish all of that. What I've learned from Professor Chow was strictly techniques, and whatever techniques I learned today will never be repeated the next day. So what I did, whatever techniques I learned, I compiled it together and then I made it as a joint thing, but I put it in order of what I'm learning, and that's the difference. I've always can remember exactly what I've learned because I put it in form. But other than that, Professor just shows you one technique, and of course, then he will let it go. Then the next day he'll show you another technique, and it's a good thing to show you how much speed, power you should apply to the technique. But if you just ignore everything, then you don't have anything. Okay, but I put my techniques in a form, and then of course to get the character within that form, that's when I try to choose an animal uh, to back up that form, to give them that focusing of the eye of a tiger or something like that. So just naming that technique with an animal, get that instinct, and that's what's created. That's the difference between Professor Chow and I. But the application behind it, no matter what it is, it's always our basic of speed, power, and accuracy. How did I come up with the name of Shaolin Kenpo? Basically, uh, it was because of Professor Chow. Now, as I was driving down on the highway by Army Street, I happened to look to my left, and as I looked, I seen a guy pointing at me, and I noticed that not the guy pointing at me, but I seen Professor Chow in the car. And I haven't seen him for years, like about 17 years. So what happened, I pulled over on the side, and they pulled over also. So when we stopped, got out of the car, Professor Chow got out of the car too. I hugged my teacher, Professor Chow. I said, "What are you doing here?" Somebody in the background said, "He's here to shut down the schools." And I said, "Well, it can't be me because I'm affiliated with Ed Parker." And how I'm affiliated with Ed Parker is that when I was in Hawaii, Professor Chow brought out some pictures, and he showed me some pictures of Ed Parker. And when I seen the picture of Ed Parker at the time was just a brown belt. I said to the professor, "I know him. I know him. We were in the Coast Guard together, Ed Parker and I were in the Coast Guard." And then I said, "Where is he?" And then he mentioned that, well, he's in Southern California. And so when I was here, I made contact to Ed Parker one day, and he was so surprised to know that I was taking Kenpo from Professor Chow. He was so excited. So Ed Parker came down and we talked. And I noticed that he had a school in Pasadena, and he was involved with movie directors, producers, and all the actors. And he also mentioned that he chose Hollywood, and that's where the money was. So I was so impressed with Ed, and he was also impressed with me. Well, anyway, at the time when I sent Professor Chow on the freeway, they said they're going to close down the school. I said, you can't, because I'm affiliated with Ed Parker now. I got a black belt, I'm affiliated with Ed. I don't think there's no necessary Professor Chow to close down the school. So what I did, I invited the professor. I said, come down to my school. And the professor said, yeah, I'll come down. And when the professor walked in my school for the first time, he had an entourage, about maybe 5-6 people walking in with him, and they all walked in, like that. And then so I called out my students, I called out my children. My children performed, my brown belts performed at that time, and I performed. And so when the professor seen my performance, he was so amazed. From when I left him and what I had to do was completely different. I've always had something to eat at after class. I usually take my family, we go out and have some Chinese day. So I had a table set up. There was 3 tables, because my children, myself, Professor Chow, and the people that he had with him. So I took care of the bills and everything. And while I was there eating and everything, I talked to the professor, and I mentioned to him that I would like to him that if he ever came back, I would pay for his transportation coming here. Maybe I can have a seminar with him. And in fact, we have the California Karate Championships that Ed Parker and I had together, and I wanted to invite the professor to be there. So this one year, the professor says, okay, he'll come by. But there was a little conflict on that, and I'm sorry to say that, because I didn't know that Ed Parker and the professor had a fallout at that time. And so when I told Ed that I was going to invite the professor to be at the tournament, Ed didn't like that. So what happened, I tried to negotiate with Ed, telling him that we'll take care of all the expenses of the professor, this and that. But Ed was upset with the professor, or vice president of the professor was upset with him. But that's when the Professor Chow said that I should actually have Shaolin Kenpo, because it's different from Ed Parker. So that's how Shaolin Kenpo. So that year, we went under the banner of Shaolin Kenpo, and we attended the international championships. And that year, that's when all my children captured first place. Shaolin Kenpo did very well, and that's how it became very strong, Shaolin Kenpo. Now, remember earlier I said that we were having the CKC, and then I invited Professor Chow to be here at the CKC, and at the same time I tried to have a seminar going, and we have people from all over the country attending the seminar, plus the CKC. But anyway, when the professor came here, we had a seminar. People from all over the country attended, and it was a good seminar. And the night before the seminar, I would ask the professor what he was going to teach. He said nothing. I said nothing. I brought him over to a seminar, and he says nothing. So I says, well, that evening before the seminar, I says, why don't you show me? I mean, if you say you're not going to teach nothing, why don't you show me? And then he said, yeah, you teach him. I said, okay, show me what you have. So my family and I, we practiced exactly what we're supposed to do. So at the day of the seminar, the professor was just looking around and watching how we're giving the seminar. And then we had a lunch break. And then normally, whatever we do, we have self-defense technique behind it. So I asked him politely, I says, well, Professor, what you showed me, are you going to break it down? He said, no. again, I was sort of disappointed. No, he said, you should. So I showed whatever I learned from the basics for breakdown. And then after that, he was very pleased with it. Then I asked him, I said, what do you call it? He said, nothing. I said to myself, well, since he was nicknamed as Thunderbolt, so I said, can I call it the Thunderbolt form? He says, okay, fine. So that's how the Thunderbolt form, the dance, was created. And so I guess that's what Professor actually was very impressed with, naming the Thunderbolt set. And that's why he said that I should call it Shaolin Kenpo, different from Ed Parker. Now, Ed Parker was very unique. He had the speed, the power, and accuracy, just like that I had, because we both trained with Professor Chow, and we got that from Professor Chow with all the speed, power, and accuracy. But then, when I got my 9th degree black belt, a few years after that, that's when the professor passed away. And when he passed away, I told Ed Parker, well, Ed Parker, you should step up to the plate now, and you should be the Grand Master. But this is when somebody else was involved in the picture. Another person named Sam Kaoa, who actually claimed that he is the successor to Professor Chow. Because when Ed and I actually, Ed was by himself, and of course I was teaching my own Shaolin Kenpo. Sam Kaoa got very close to Professor Chow, and he claimed that he showed a diploma that he was the successor, and we didn't want him to go that. I knew what Sam Kaoa was. He made stories of that. He trained Professor when he was a little boy, and that's all BS. We know the true story about it. But anyway, he contacted Black Belt, and we're supposed to get together, Black Belt, myself, Sam Kaoa, but he never did get together. But anyway, Ed refused to take that position, and of course, after that, after Professor Chow passed away, then another year, Ed Parker passed away. So what am I going to do? Well, since I got the rank of 9th degree, I decided to be the Grand Master of Shaolin Kenpo. I'm not going to go into the Kara hole of what Sam Kaoa was doing. He claimed to be the successor of Kara hole. Well, I'm Shaolin Kenpo, so I have my position to take care of and my association. My thoughts on Bruce Lee, when I was living at 1014 Bryant, and Ed used to come down and visit me. Ed and I happened to be in Chinatown, and then I seen a book of brick breaking, and it named the person Jimmy Lee. So when we seen the book of brick breaking, Ed and I, we got in touch with Jimmy Lee, and we talked to Jimmy Lee. And Jimmy Lee, again, was a very nice person. He was practicing Kung Fu. He was with Y.C. Wong. No, not Y.C. Wong. I forgot the name, who he was with. But anyway, he was in Waverly Place in Chinatown training. We went over to his house, met him, Bruce Lee, and we became good friends. And it was Jimmy Lee that called me up at my home while Ed Parker was visiting me and said, Ralph, you guys got to meet this guy, Bruce Lee. This guy is fantastic. And so Ed and I said, okay, fine. We went to to Jimmy Lee's house, and we met Bruce Lee for the first time. And Bruce stood up and he performed. And wow, he was really good. He had a snap and everything. And Bruce was a very arrogant person, but he knew what he was talking about. That's one thing about it. He backed up everything that he was talking about. He ended up that Bruce became a guy that he was funny. He was like a philosopher. He was funny, very knowledgeable. But you get to know him. He likes you, and you became the best of friends. Jimmy would tell me, Ralph, let's go to Chinatown. Let's go have lunch, this and that. And then when I go to Chinatown to have lunch, I walk in the restaurant. Who's there? Bruce. More likely, just kind of surprising. And Ed was there too. We just get together. We're the best of friends. In fact, when Jimmy invited me, and I met Bruce, I invited Bruce to come down to Valencia Street. And Valencia Street, and Ed Parker and I was there. And Bruce would always perform his technique with Ed Parker, and Ed and I, we look at him, we say, wow, this guy got the speed, he got the power, and he knows what he's doing. So when the movie The Green Hornet came up, it was because of I think it was in 1964, Ed Parker's first international championship. That's how Ed invited Bruce to perform at the international championship. And this is where Bruce performed the 1-inch punch, where he would actually have a guy stand up and he would hit the guy so hard, the guy would fall back on the chair, sit down on the chair. And Bruce had that technique done right, the 1-inch punch. But there was a trick behind that 1-inch punch. But you have to just watch the foundation of Bruce, how he moves. It's not only his shoulders, but his hips, his waist, but his whole body would move. But you can't see it. But if you watch his legs, you can see it. But you see, you're so impressed with the hand technique. Wham! When he hits you so hard, you forget about the whole foundation, right? That's why in my system I always say, before a person performs a hand technique, watch his legs. That's the first thing you do. Watch his legs. And this is how you borrow that power and speed, by watching someone's foundation. Bruce actually would always demonstrate, and I would always enjoy his demonstration. But one day he said, Ralph, come on, I want you to stop my back fist. That was Bruce's lead technique, stopping his back fist. He would tell people that I'm going to hit you with a back fist. I want you to put your hand up and try to block it. And when he says, you ready? They said, ready. He goes with the back fist. They can't block it. He's so fast. So one day he talked to me about it. He said, Ralph, let's see if we can block my back fist. I said, come on, for Christ's sake. We're enjoying ourselves. We're talking. I don't want to be doing that. He said, come on, let's see. So I said, okay, fine. So I stood up with him. He said, you ready? I said, yeah, I'm ready. He went with the back fist. I went wham with the back fist too, because I love the back fist. So we connected. He said, you son of a gun. I said, that's why there's only one Bruce Lee and one Ralph Castro. I said, I don't let anybody tell me how to fight. I fight my way. My understanding with James Mitose, this is what I heard. Professor Chow basically was very streetwise. Okay, he learned a lot of stuff, what he claimed from his father. And Mitose, coming from Japan, was actually, he had a reputation for teaching Kenpo, and him and Chow got together. Now, Mitose was a person very smooth when he talked, and Professor Chow was one of his instructors. But Professor Chow, because of his extra talent of teaching a little bit different from Mitose, he still did what Mitose wanted, but he had the Chinese style of practicing. A lot of the people wanted to learn what Chow had. So when Mitose left, he designated certain people to be representing the system that Mitose had. But Chow actually went on his own, and that's when he called it Kenpo Karate. Basically, I think that all the teachers want to be at least 3 steps ahead of their students. So I would say 15th degree, that's it. Now, Ed Parker was saying this, so high that you can be, but I think the teacher always wanted to be separate from his students, so he always claimed to be at least 3 degrees higher. Yeah, he was 13th, he came to 15th degree, and of course they claimed at that time 15th is the highest, but who is to challenge the man, basically, when he wanted to set himself apart from everybody else? because he was a person by himself. And who was going to face him and challenge him? I don't think anybody wanted to challenge him at that time. So let it be. If he wanted to be 50th degree, that's fine. I'm content with that. I'm not going to challenge that. My purpose of teaching martial arts is to have every person have the confidence in himself that he will always be able to defend himself. That's all I want. I want to share that. As simple as 1, 2, 3. Always be able to defend them. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. I just want to see ourselves being accepted by other people. That we have a good system. That they want to learn it. Just like people want to learn judo, jiu-jitsu. It's a popular system. That's all I want it to be. Because it's different. It's different. That when we perform it, people will say, "Wow, it's different from certain styles." It's more like not one of its kind, but it's something that they would like to learn. Something that they look forward, that they want to learn. It's just like how you say how people want to learn mixed martial arts. I just want that people would love to learn Shaolin Kenpo. Do I still train today? I train every day and every hour and every minute. My mind is constantly involved in what I'm doing. I never let it go by because I'm always thinking my students, what is their weakness, what is their strength, and then how can I make them stronger. I'm always involved with it. I never let it one day go by where I don't think about it. I think people like you that have been involved with it for quite some time can understand that. Yeah. But some who have just made it, they can say, okay, I made my black belt, that's it. What else is there to learn? No, there's more to it. This is when you begin to learn. And that's it. See, the difference between a student that understands the system and one that doesn't understand. I can talk to someone and explain myself and they'll understand. But if I have to stand up and show them how it's done, then they don't understand it. See, that's why even talking to my own children, I can just tell them what is good and what is bad. I don't have to display it because they already understand it. But when someone says, I don't understand, well, what do you mean? Then they're not ready for it. Well, I'm not using that much strength that I used to use. I've already focused on the idea that I don't need that much strength to apply what I need to. I don't have to condition myself like I'm going 15 rounds in boxing. I don't need that. All it takes me is just a few seconds to handle the situation. Because of my experience, I kind of say that I don't have to go round for round, to or less 2 minutes. I don't think so, because even when I try to think about the early years when Bruce Lee had his situation that he fought the guy 2 minutes, and I thought it was ridiculous. 2 minutes in fighting to defend yourself. It's ridiculous. You should be in 3 seconds, just like that. 1, 2, 3 to stop anybody. And that's how I feel. No matter how old I am, I can still do it in 3 seconds. I think I became wiser. That's all. I became wiser from the day that I was younger. In my younger days, I disagreed with certain people. I would just challenge them right away to put my point across. But today, I don't want to do those things. I want to just talk using kind words and talking to the person and make them understand that there's more than just trying to fight and kill each other. I just want to live in peace. That's all I want. I became wiser, that's all. But when I was younger, I don't care. I was crazy. I would like to say, first of all, I praise my Lord Jesus Christ for giving me my most precious gift, the gift of life, to me and my family. And I love all my children, my students, my family, and I'm very, very happy that I have my students with the loyalty and support, and I just love everyone. I thank you. God bless you. I agreed to do this biography because I wanted to share that to everyone that I am the founder of Shaolin Kenpo, and I wanted it to go down in generations, that all my family will know who Uncle Ralph was.
Greg, what do you think is the most important thing for a white belt to learn?
To know the difference between his right and left.